minutes after 10, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. But I thought we'd change the pace a little bit this morning. I know that the attention of the world is quite rightly still focused upon Ukraine, and we will indeed be keeping a very close eye on proceedings there, particularly heavy bombardments overnight in Kyiv. But forgive me if I call this wrong or that you disagree. I don't think we'll dedicate the whole programme to it today, partly because we're in that period that I described yesterday somewhat tritely, perhaps, as sort of wait-and-see pie. It's as if horns have been locked, isn't it? And we're now waiting to see what happens, what transpires. So bear with me on that and let me know if you think that's a misjudgment. Still a lot of love coming into the studio, I have to say, for Guy Verhofstadt. Sometimes I think I've woken up in a parallel universe, where mainstream radio programmes are carrying criticism of Nigel Farage, pointing out that he was cheerleading for Vladimir Putin while claiming that he was the real patriot, and those of us that tried to protect the country from people like him were somehow the traitors. Astonishing upsurge in the British public's support for people fleeing war in Ukraine. Priti Patel left completely adrift, I think, in the Home Office, given that her only reason for being there in the first place is because of her performative callousness towards refugees. That's completely, it's like the rug has been pulled from beneath her feet at 100 miles an hour, and people obviously recognising that we are currently struggling to find a role in the world, given this curious new order that's emerging with kind of Russia, China, America and the EU being the four major forces, none of which, of course, we're part of. But hey-ho, on we go. I was drawn to Michael Gove. Oh, there's a phrase I'm never going to say with a straight face again. Michael Gove in the House of Commons yesterday seemed to crystallise quite a few of these problems. There was a man really struggling with I almost have whiplash. I bet Daily Mail readers have got whiplash as well. You don't need me to remind you some of the front pages they've carried over the years with regard to refugees, and today trumpeting the fact that 44,000 Brits have signed up hoping or offering to shelter someone fleeing Ukraine. That figure now overnight almost doubled. So, I mean, it's amazing. It's bizarre. I think whiplash is the word to use, right? If you move your head so quickly, you pull something, it's whiplash. We've done a 180-degree about turn, and gratifying though it is, you can't help wondering about all the damage and harm that has been done already. So we'll begin with something completely different this morning before getting stuck into some of those issues. I want you, 5 minutes after 10 is the time, I want you to reflect upon some footage. If you haven't seen it yet, I'm sure it's on the LBC website. In fact, I know that it is on the LBC website because I checked before I came on the radio. I'm very professional like that. There's a bloke called, it's Oleg Deripaska, isn't it? He denies, for the record, that it was actually his house, but claims it was owned by a relative. He was sanctioned last week over his close ties to Vladimir Putin. He accused the British government of colluding with anarchist protesters. Do you see what I mean about having to sort of cling on quite tightly to reality because things are crumbling and just going off in such odd directions, odd tangents? It's a month since Roman Abramovich was feted and cheered in pretty much all corners of this society, and now it appears that he's running around the world trying to avoid sanctions. He's now fled Israel in his private jet. His yachts are moving out of Montenegrin waters because they've confirmed that they're going to impose sanctions and moving into international waters. It's incredible. A turn of a sixpence, and the world, it would seem, has changed. But what struck me yesterday was not the changing nature of the geopolitical infrastructure of this planet. What struck me yesterday was the number of police officers that turned up at his £50 million Belgravia property, belongs to the family of Deripaska, we will say, to deal with these protesters. I genuinely don't get it. I'm very blessed on this programme that an awful lot of police officers, past and present, listen to it. And you might be able to shed some light on this. I want to stress something else. And this, here's a tricky thing. Come here a minute. I've got something I need to share with you. At this point in proceedings, when discussing matters police-related, it is my tradition to point out that the ordinary rank-and-file officers do not deserve to be lampooned or lambasted for the decisions and the behaviour of their senior officers, of their leadership. I am wondering, in the light of recent revelations to emerge from Charing Cross Police Station and elsewhere, the finding last week with regard to that Sarah Everard vigil that reclaimed these streets and other people wanted to hold, and the Met told them they couldn't, wrongly, a court has found. I do wonder. And, of course, the policing of the if you like, unofficial vigil that subsequently unfolded, and the harrowing sight of young women being dragged away by police at a time when, of course, we now know police were standing by, for good or for ill, when people were wheeling suitcases full of booze into Downing Street for what must be surely pretty close to being de facto illegal parties. So I have a little pause there, and that breaks my heart, actually. That really does. I caught myself doing something else the other day, because the studio that I speak to you from every morning is in London's fashionable Leicester Square, and Charing Cross Police Station is just around the corner. I sometimes, very occasionally, when the planets align and there's some people in front of me in uniform, when I pop into Pret-a-Manger to get my ginger shot and my mango smoothie, when there are police officers in front of me in the line, I pay for their coffees. Sometimes you don't have to because they get them free anyway. And sometimes I don't notice. But I caught myself on Friday morning, a couple of people in front of me, and I thought they're from Charing Cross Police Station, so I didn't do it. And I know that's a little bit pathetic, and I know it's a little bit silly, but I just use it to illustrate what I'm trying to articulate in terms of not automatically now saying to you, we're going to have a conversation about the police, but please remember that the rank and file officers are good men and women and true, and they don't deserve... I just mention that because it's happened to me. And I spend every morning asking you to tell me about stuff that's happened to you, or asking you to examine your thoughts and opinions and share them with everybody listening. So, although I'm a little bit embarrassed by elements of that vignette, and it possibly even sounds like virtue signalling, as the fascists like to call decency, I just noticed it. And I hope it changes back. And I don't know what will make it change back, but I hope it happens soon, because I prefer to be a citizen who feels protected by police. I also reflect upon a message I got last time we talked about policing matters, which pointed out that growing up in a country where you feel the police are there to protect you is privilege. I'd never clocked that before. I'm 50 now. I was 50 this year. I'd never clocked that before. Even when I talk about, I've had the privilege of getting to know Baroness Lawrence. I've talked endlessly on the programme about racial profiling and the absolute injustice of stop and search in practice. I know racism inside out. I talk about it constantly. It had never actually clicked that my intuitive attitude, the way that my mum would say to me when I was a kid, if you get lost, find a policeman, my intuitive attitude towards the police has always been essentially positive. I see them as an institution that is there to protect people like me. And I never knew the words "like me" needed to be on that sentence. If you'd asked me even a year ago, I'd have said the police are there to protect people. But they're not, are they? If you come from a different background, if you come from a different family, police are not there to protect people like you. Not in anything like the way they're there to protect people like me. And think of people from the traveller community. Who might have the same name as me and the same skin colour as me, but they don't have the same relationship with the police as I do. And that's just not right. And I can't believe it took me 50 years and a text from someone to this programme for me to clock that. I had no idea where that came from, that little... I thought we were going to do a sort of form of light relief because there's no sort of casualties to the conversation that we're having today, but we've gone off a woke cliff. And yes, I did forget to reintroduce Woke Watch on yesterday's programme. Keith, what were you thinking? It's your job to remind me of these things. It's your chief role, that and bottle washing. But we may try today. We got a little sound effect and everything, and obviously the seriousness of world affairs have rather distracted us from the frivolities of Woke Watch, but we'll try and reinstall it today. I know what you're thinking. James, this is supposed to be a phone-in and you haven't asked us a question yet. And you'd be absolutely right. So let me get on with the question. Why did so many police officers turn up? I think there were about 10 trucks, about 10 vans. So there's one house in Belgravia, right? There are 5 anarchists, or so-called anarchists, who broke into it and announced that they were sort of occupying it on behalf of the Ukrainian people and that they felt that it should be handed over to refugees. They called themselves the Property Liberation Front, or the PLF to their friends. And the police, the Metropolitan Police, didn't just turn up mob-handed. They turned up as if it was a riot that was underway. They had shields, they had all the kit and caboodle, but it was the numbers, the sheer number of officers that were there. And I want to know why, OK? 0345 6060 973. I want because I've got that naive, intuitive sense of the police being a force for good in this country, although I now acknowledge at the age of 50 that is not how many people grow up. But I'd like there to be a positive reason, because I know that many people listening to this programme now have called the police after having their homes actually burgled, and they haven't seen anyone for a week. Is it as crass and as horrible as it looks from the outside, that if your house is worth £50 million, fact check, hashtag fact check, if your house is worth £50 million and some anarchists break into it, there'll be 100 police officers there in 10 vans before you can say Jack Robinson. But if your house isn't worth £50 million, if it is a relatively modest abode, you'd be lucky to see a police officer for dust, even as Fingers McFingers is carting your kit and caboodle out of the back door, sticking it in the back of his van. I genuinely don't get it, but I presume there is an operational or a sensible explanation. Will it be a big enough or a compelling enough explanation to counteract the fact, the feeling, the sense, the suspicion that I have, and I suspect you have? If you haven't seen the footage yet, go and have a look now. 0345 6060973. Was the value of the home that was invaded the key factor in the decision to send so many officers? And if so, is that right or fair or justified? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060973. You don't have to be a copper to contribute by any stretch of the imagination, but you might have insights that I am obviously, by dint of my job as a gob on a stick, I am not going to be party to. And in exactly 5 seconds' time, I'm going to hit the 10:15 junction, bang on the buzzer for about the first time in a year and a half. Boom. 10:18 is the time, and is it just two-tier policing? Is there a reason why a £50 million unoccupied mansion owned by an oligarch who's been sanctioned gets broken into and the police turn up in their droves in 5 seconds flat with more vans than the average petrol station forecourt? And if you got burgled in the last couple of weeks, chances are you didn't see a police officer at all. And if you did, it was certainly not with any intention or hope of solving the crime of which you were a victim. I want to be wrong. I want there to be a complicated or a rational explanation for it, and that's where you come in. Richard's in Maidstone. Richard, what do you think?
Yes, good morning to you, James. I was a police officer in the centre of London for 37 years,
yeah,
and I dealt with things like this. Yes, it is relevant. These are not
What is?
Well, your question was quite specific.
Yes.
Is it money related?
Yes, exactly. So that is relevant. The bigger the house, the bigger the bobbies will turn up.
Is the police response going to be different in a £50 million house in Belgravia compared with an £80,000 house in Darlington? Yes, it is. To start with,
why?
These people aren't the nicest of people.
You don't know that.
Well, hang on, James.
I am. I'm just saying you don't know that. You weren't there. You haven't met them. They might be lovely.
Well, these are the kind of people that when the police put ladders up, when the police started to go up the ladders, they kicked the ladders down. There's a clue.
Well, not really. They've occupied a house and they're trying to stop people getting into it. I think they're not as nasty as the average burglar or the average, drug-addicted mugger, are they?
I'm not suggesting they are, but if I'm halfway up a ladder...
You're introducing questions of nastiness. You're introducing questions of nastiness, Richard. They didn't do anything apart from kicking a ladder that no one was necessarily compelled to climb up anyway. And the list of criminals in this country who I feel most of my listeners would want the police to be dealing with, I don't know that they'd make the top million.
I think you're missing the point here.
Quite possibly, Richard, yes.
James, you're doing what you castigate others for doing. You're talking over me while I'm talking over you. Please, these people have a propensity, and you know they do, to go...
No, I am going to talk over you again. You can't make generalisations. Everyone is equal before the law. You're a former officer. You should know that. And you've come on the radio programme, Richard, without realising it, to tell me that people aren't equal before the law. It's determined by the value of the house that you own. You've already told me that. Good luck wriggling off that hook.
Let me finish.
Well, go on then. Carry on. Finish away. But stop making judgments about people that you have never met and have no knowledge of, please.
No, of course I don't know their names and addresses or their CRO numbers.
You don't know their character or their personality, their intentions or their motives.
No.
So I'll tell you, they were there to reclaim the house on behalf of Ukrainian refugees. You've already told me that the value of the house determines the quality of the policing that a citizen in this country can expect. So expand and justify that for us.
Good. Can I get a word in sideways with you, please, James?
If you stop complaining about the nature of my approach to talking to you, you'd have already had at least 4 more minutes to put forward your defence of police according to wealth of citizens. So try again.
As soon as the first police officers turned up, they tried to gain access and were refused, from what I can gather.
Why did they turn up so quickly?
Because they may well have been around the corner. See, this is another fallacy put around by the press.
It's a simple question. Why did they turn up so quickly? Last time I got burgled, it took a day and a half for anyone to come round.
No, that's just not correct. The last time you were hang on,
I was
James,
there.
Please. James, last
Richard.
time you were burgled and you phoned the police and said, I have been burgled, you used the past tense.
No, I didn't. I said they've literally just climbed out of my window. I can hear the car in the street outside. Please come quickly. I've got a child upstairs.
And I suspect that they saturated the area very quickly.
No, I told you, they came round a day and a half later.
No,
and also, this house was empty.
James, there's a difference between being burgled and has been burgled.
This house was empty. There was no one in it. There was no one in it.
No, I'm just correcting something you said a minute ago. One's a direct threat now, one is past tense and needs reporting.
I think they were downstairs when I rang.
Well, a minute ago, they were out the window when you rang.
Well, the window was wide open. When I came downstairs, the car had been started outside and the window was wide open, so they could easily have been downstairs when I rang.
Believe me, James, if somebody...
Anyway, back to why, if my house had been worth more money, I'd have got a better police response, Richard.
You did get I'm quite sure you got an appropriate police response.
They were not 10 vans parked outside and people putting ladders on the window. Why did you tell me when you came on the radio that it was quite correct for the value of the house to determine the quality of the response?
Because if these are I'll use the word if these are the people that have a propensity to go in and trash the place and burn it down, if they take out a row of 10 of these houses, they've done £500 million worth of damage.
But who's...
And you have a duty of care.
So
not just the
where's the threshold then? Where's the threshold? How much does my house have to be worth in order for police officers like you to think it's worth bombing round there at 100 miles an hour?
What you're actually castigating is the fact that the police did turn up and did a good response. That you
no, what I'm asking is why don't poor people get that level of policing?
Well, I don't think you come under that category, but poor people do.
Oh, OK. So now you're claiming that someone poor being robbed, the £80,000 house in Darlington that you used as your own example when you came on the radio would expect the same level of police response if it was a victim of a crime.
If they're being burgled
You're contradicting yourself now, pal. Do you need your notebook?
James, if they're being burgled now, use the word now.
OK, let's find out. If I can find, I'll tell you what, put your money on the table. If I can find one person listening to this programme now who reported a burglary in process and got anything like the response that we saw on our screens yesterday, I'll give you the money myself. How much do you want to bet?
And can they be...
10 vans. 10 vans. How much do you want to bet?
No, James, you're being silly now, and that's unlike you.
I'm really not. You're telling me that I'm wrong. I'm telling you that I'm right. How are we going to prove it? We just find lots and lots of people who reported crimes from houses that weren't worth £50 million and got an identical response to the one we all saw on our screens yesterday.
Phone in, can't they? We know that. They phone in...
Well, you go and find someone then.
There's lots of people...
You go and find someone then. Get someone from your days on the force.
Well, I know for a fact that...
Well, that's easy then. Bring them back and I'll give you a tenner.
I haven't finished talking. You're talking over me again, James.
I'm bored of you now. Daljit's in Chiswick. Daljit, what would you like to say?
First of all, I'd like to say that the last caller, is an absolute example of the problems that everyone does have.
You just don't understand. Of course we go round to an expensive house faster and mob-handed in a way that we wouldn't for a cheaper house. People like you just don't understand how it works. Unbelievable. Come on.
Hi there. So what I'm getting at is it may not necessarily be the fact... And I'm not a supporter of the police all the time, and I'm not against them all the time, but on this instance, I'm going to say that you've got a property in Belgrave Square. You've got to look at the fact it's not just a matter of the number of police that went in, because they don't know how many other people are inside the property.
They're going to have a fair idea. They filmed it, man.
You're going to have a fair idea. I agree with you.
They had their camera phones. I could see the piano.
But I'm also going to say you've got to look at who's next door. And from a real estate point of view, Belgrave Square has got half a dozen embassies there.
There you go.
So they probably turned up not because of that one incident, but because of the address of Belgrave Square and who else is probably living there. And from the safety of that, and for the safety of the officers and not knowing if there's anything else going on, other than a handful of people with the unknown of are there other people on the inside or not, they've gone in mob-handed, I agree, but they've also looked at who else lives there, so they haven't probably just done it on that one.
So it's not just the value of your house that determines the quality of the policing you get, it's the status of your neighbours.
Correct.
It's not.
That's what I think.
It's not very good, is it?
No, it's pretty pathetic. I mean, like you said earlier, if this guy could prove that the police would turn up mob-handed for someone else, how quick would it happen? He wasn't a good example of a police officer.
No, he wasn't. And let's be clear, I'm sure lots of police officers listening found his contribution just as ridiculous as you and I did. Here is what one member of the group actually said, one of the nasty people that Richard maligned without any evidence whatsoever. I wanted to do something for the people suffering under war. If the people being shelled wake up, they will see that the people of London care. It should be handed over to Ukrainian refugees and refugees of all nations. We are in it until Putin ends the war and refugees are homed. The group said they did not want to occupy the building and were instead staging a process which is legally protected and prohibits their removal. They claimed their removal would have to follow a High Court or County Court order. I don't think that is actually what transpired, but they certainly were not sort of wrong'uns or yobbos. They were political protesters.
Sorry to talk over you. They made their point. I'm being polite.
That's all right, you carry on.
Thank you. The bottom line is this. Yes, they went to mom-handing. Yes, it's probably your postcode. Yes, it is the neighbours that are there. Yes, it was wrong, the number of people, the officers that turned up. But I think they should have just de-escalated
down to the postcode, down to the postcode and the prices. And listen, that might be defensible, that might be justified. You might be able to say that was a good idea, but at least be honest about it. Don't say they were going to burn the house down after they'd announced their intentions and their motives on the record and declared that they were there to claim the property in order to hand it over to Ukrainian refugees. What a strange opening to the programme this morning. If you haven't seen the footage, you may be a little bit puzzled by the shock that I'm sharing with you today. But the numbers were absolutely breathtaking. Speaking of matters Ukrainian, I can tell you that we've just arranged an interview with the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Kingdom, Vadim Pristaiko, and we'll be doing that shortly after the 10:30 news. So whatever you do, don't miss that. Let's go back to the phones. Adam is in Plymouth. Adam, what would you like to say? Is this normal behaviour? Are you surprised by it? Is it justifiable? What's going on?
I'm unfortunately not surprised by it.
I am. Am I naive?
I know. I don't think you are naive. I just don't necessarily think that you. Sorry, I'm just quickly feeding the cat.
That's quite all right. Well, do you want to get the cat fed first and then continue the conversation, or are you one of those rare men who can multitask?
I can multitask.
Wow.
Yeah, she's already fed and she's tucking in. So what it is, if we accept that the police are the wing, if you like, of the state that enforce the law that the current government sees fit to enforce, and therefore they are funded by said government. Yes. And who at the moment, let's face it, is in the news a lot at the minute, funding the government? These oligarchs.
Would this not have happened under a different government? When David? I mean, it's not going to have gone upstairs, is it, to the Home Office? A decision on this?
I doubt necessarily it would have happened. Well, I don't doubt it would have happened, but to the level, I don't know. Yeah, but when you look at how enmeshed the current Conservative Party are with these people, I think there is an awful lot of money talks.
I'd have to say that this might have been one of the little small moment of his contribution where Richard made some sense, in that he thought this was perfectly normal. Of course you're going to go round to the more valuable house. It doesn't matter what flavour of government you've got in power. The police are there to protect capital.
Yes. And it's also, if you think about it, I mean, maybe not so much in London, I don't know. Well, sorry, not so much in Plymouth, I don't know about London particularly. But 50 million quid properties and their contents are, sort of a bit of a rarity, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, watch the footage. I know you probably have, but it's not like if it was 2 vans that turned up, or if it was 10 coppers that turned up, when most of us don't get anybody coming round. It was a convoy. It was absolutely unbelievable. Am I just being stupid? I mean, are people listening to this and of course they go round if it's worth £50 million. That's just how things are and should be. If so, explain it to me. But after this, after the very latest news headlines, I'll be talking to the Ukrainian ambassador to the UK. Here's Dominic Ellis. 10:34 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where I'm walking a tightrope between waiting for the Ukrainian ambassador to be ready to talk to us and seeing Roy in Bristol waiting on the phone line. So I'm just going to exchange some pleasantries with Roy, but probably not get into the meat of his contribution to the programme, while hoping that as that happens, the line to the Ukrainian ambassador is established. Roy, how are you, mate?
All right, how are you, James?
Yeah, pretty good. I'm just hanging around waiting for the Ukrainian ambassador
Shall I begin to say what I was going to say?
Well, we're running the risk of being cut off before you even reach your prime.
Well, Well, then, it's nice weather here. It's looking, very spring-like. And I think you enjoyed spring yesterday morning.
Getting earlier, getting a bit lighter in the mornings, isn't it? That's nice as well.
It is. Are you enjoying your breakfast, James,
I tend to stay off the solids until I finish the show, but I'm chugging green tea like it's going out of fashion, Roy.
Yes, I hear you refer to this. You must be a very fit man.
Have you seen the size? Well, let's not get carried away. Have you seen the size of my mug? My mug's getting its own show. It's getting a spin-off show on LBC at weekends.
When you get to 50, James, I'm afraid that's what happens.
Yeah, so I hear. Start your point, and then we may
start my point. And if I'm lost, I'm lost.
Indeed.
I think there's another aspect to this thing. You've been talking about the value of the property as being the key element, or it has been suggested that's the key element. I think there's another element, which is, as it were, political. I was a criminal defence solicitor for many, many years. I represented lots of people who were arrested at demonstrations and so on and so forth. Indeed, in 1980, I was present at a demonstration against the National Front. I'd just qualified, and I was a bit of a street photographer, and I saw this arrest taking
Roy, I warned you that this was... Amazingly, you've built up some tension now, so we'll pause Roy on a cliff edge, on veritable tenterhooks, and cross live to Vadim Pristaiko, who is the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Kingdom and who joins me on the line now. Ambassador, many thanks for your time. May I begin by asking what you understand the latest situation to be back at home?
Well, I understand that Russians are not stopping. We're trying our best. We're fighting with the assistance of our friends, but mostly ourselves. But they unfortunately are throwing more and more soldiers, tanks, helicopters, everything in. I believe they understand that they're behind the schedule. They wanted to bring the big leader the victory, which is not there. That's why they're becoming more and more frustrated, that they're becoming more and more barbaric, bombarding cities, bombarding humanitarian corridors, not allowing us to bring food, even water, to our besieged cities.
What sort of intelligence do you have about their capabilities to sustain this attack? I've seen some reports that may be overly optimistic, that the Russians are sort of running out of resources, running out of supplies.
We also have this intelligence, and some intelligence actually suggests that they're appealing now to Chinese to get more rockets. I hope the Chinese won't make this stupid move. There's enough already. 700 rockets they launched at us, Russians. That's more than enough to destroy so many lives already. We don't need China to come into the picture, that's for sure. But I agree with you. They are running out of time, they are running out of resources, and they are running out of patience of their own people, who are coming, in numbers on the protests. You probably have seen yesterday one lady tried to intervene, even in translation, TV translation. People are brave enough to come up and say that the war should be stopped immediately.
And yet I read that 75% of Russians are supportive of Putin's manoeuvres, and the obvious reason for that is that they have access only to Kremlin-approved propaganda sites instead of proper journalism. Could you give my listeners just a small idea of what that is like, of how you can have people in Ukraine telling their family members in Russia what is happening, and their family members in Russia telling them that they must be mistaken and that they know that what is happening is nothing like what they're seeing on screens all over the world?
I'd be more than happy to tell you. I was 21 years old when Soviet Union collapsed. And at that time, we had 3 programs on TV. The TV is totally controlled. 3 newspapers and just 1 party. I do remember how people had nothing, no idea what is happening. One story. I was myself collecting my breakfast money to help UK's miners. Because we saw that you are guys dying out here, we had to support. And a small Soviet kid was bringing this couple of pennies to help those kids.
Can I thank you? It's better late than never, but the gratitude of the...
See, now you survived thanks to my breakfast money.
So, crikey, that's an incredibly poignant vignette. You mentioned assistance from your friends. Do you feel that you're getting enough?
No, this is very sensitive political issue. We have to praise each and every pound, each and every rocket, each and every helmet, and we're doing it sincerely. And we understand that not many nations actually can stand up and stand with us against Putin. So many of them scared of his might in the nuclear and the rest of it. But there are some nations who are not just standing, but leading. And UK, US, a couple of our usual friends like Poland, Canada, Baltic nations, but so many of them are still not there, still not with us. Recently, German moved, they were so neutral, if I may use it with this word, being a member of NATO. But now more and more are moving in and helping us. Again, it's not enough for us to withstand this pressure because the huge Red Army is still very dangerous.
If we see the no-fly zone as the obvious extremity and as yet very little appetite for that among Western powers, what else might be on that scale? What else could countries do, countries like Germany or the UK? What could they do that is not going as far as a NATO no-fly zone, but going further than we currently are?
I agree with Secretary Wallace, who mentioned that non-fly zone can actually be approved by and supported by two means. One is the real non-fly zone, the way described, that NATO planes are enforcing this regime over our sky on our own invitation. Or the second way is to provide us with enough anti-air capabilities, so we will be able to shut down anybody who is unwelcomed in our sky, mostly Russian rockets, Russian planes and helicopters.
So, I mean, are those supply chains growing? Are those weapons making their way to Ukraine at a gratifying pace?
Now we are talking about the equipment which would allow us to cover, very low altitudes against the helicopter, something which can be shot by a soldier himself. This is great thing, like Stingers, and something the UK has and was already announced and they're coming to Ukraine. But this is only of those which are covering more or less 4 kilometers of altitude. Anything, this 700 cruise missiles been shot in Ukrainian cities. Unfortunately, these systems can intercept.
I understand. What, Ambassador, is, in your personal opinion, the best case scenario looking ahead?
We hope, and that's our tactic, it's not even strategy because we're doing each and every day, that we will fight to the moment when the sanctions and the political pressure and everything else, internal pressure within Russian society would allow, to get some of these messages through the skull of Putin and his cronies around him. That's probably the best way. But in a way, we have to survive all this, and our civilians have to survive, and our military have to survive, and the economy have to survive all of this.
Have you been surprised by the actions of Volodymyr Zelensky? Do you know him well? He has emerged in quite an incredible fashion. Were you surprised to see that?
I know him personally very well. I was his first foreign secretary before I came to UK. So I do know him personally, and I tried to have him through the day one. He made the way through the many changes, personal and as a political person. He never been active in political, but as the comedian in a very specific Ukrainian way, that the Ukrainians are almost always laughing at political figures and the political processes. You are not unique in this case, but our focus even stronger, even more sharp, more acute. So he knew everything of all the stuff. Now he had the chance to do it himself. And now he faced how it is different from what you actually criticizing, and now you have to do it yourself. And who would expect that he will have the whole war in his hands?
Of course. So cometh the hour, cometh the man.
Absolutely, you can imagine that. It changes. Imagine yourself becoming Prime Minister of UK and fighting with Putin.
Yeah, absolutely terrifying for everybody involved, I think, that prospect. Final question, Ambassador. Many people listening to this programme would like to help in whatever way they can with the equivalent of their breakfast money, perhaps, for the people of Ukraine. Is there any advice you could give to them? Is there any avenue open that they could use with the embassy's approval?
Thank you, sir. Frankly speaking, I'm surprised in a good way and humbled by this reaction of people who mentioned already to their own government, as soon as system was open for Ukrainian refugees, that they're opening up their houses to receive Ukrainian refugees. Still very difficult, for us, for Ukrainians, to see these two words together, Ukraine and refugees. But unfortunately, that's a reality. I also hope that inflation brought this breakfast money to something higher than a couple of pennies I could spare. We have the approved by embassy very simple platform. It's not even account, it's platform with Ukraine.org, which allows people to go and find whatever they believe is a Red Cross or the embassy's account or somebody else's account, PayPal, everything. So people are using it now, but I see that money are coming. We're spending them on food, on humanitarian. Unfortunately, sometimes in potable water is needed.
So if people make their way to withukraine.org, they'll be able to make donations that will definitely make their way to the places where the support is most needed.
Absolutely.
Ambassador, I think there'll be a few former miners listening who will now be reaching for their computers to make their donations immediately.
I'm 50 years old, so I believe that's around the age.
Yes, I think you're probably right. Vadim Pristaiko, thank you so much and good luck.
Thank you. We'll need it. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Vadim Pristaiko there, the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Kingdom. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's 10:45. 10:49 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. How come an empty house in Belgravia, owned by the family of a sanctioned Russian oligarch, gets broken into by 4 or 5 people who have publicly stated their motivation, which is, and they could have been yanking your chain, but as things transpired, it doesn't appear that they were. They draped Ukrainian flags and a banner over the property and announced that they had, if you like, occupied it on behalf of Ukrainian people and wanted it to be handed over to Ukrainian refugees and refugees of all nations. And before you can say Jack Robinson, I mean, we should count them, actually, to be clear. I'm not exaggerating. I'd say easily double figures of vans full of police officers turn up and they start piling out in full riot gear. Roy in Bristol, a former criminal defence solicitor, was in the middle of telling us a story that perhaps illustrates the question of whether or not there really is one law or one police service for everybody in this country. Roy, where were we before we were so rudely interrupted by the rather splendid Ukrainian ambassador?
Well, I'm very happy to give way to the Ukrainian ambassador, let me make that clear. So absolutely no problem. My point was, and I'll get back to the story, my point was that I think there's a political dimension to what the police did.
Okay.
And this I observed over many years as a criminal defence solicitor, and it started for me when I just qualified in 1980. I was present at a demonstration against the National Front, not particularly demonstration, to be completely honest. I enjoyed street photography. I saw this arrest taking place, so I moved closer, photographed the arrest. A police officer turned around, smashed the camera in my face, grabbed hold of me saying, "Why are you always picking on us?" I was with a social worker friend, and she said, "He's done nothing wrong." An arm went round her throat, and we both pulled into this van by the Special Patrol Group. A couple of other people were arrested. We were taken to Bow Street Police Station, and on the way, they radioed through saying, "We have 4 hard lefties we're bringing in." 4 hard lefties, and it reminded me of what that police officer said when he rang in.
People like that.
He was saying, they, these assumptions that people who protest, people who stand up for what they think is right and against what is wrong, will get labelled by the police so often as being anarchists, as being far lefties. Here we have a situation where people have gone in, the police don't know anything about them, but they're assuming they're troublemakers. So they arrive, as you say,
I mean, they were troublemakers of a type, weren't they? I mean, they weren't just sort of walking past or you know, doing acts of charity. They did break into the house. That is
indeed, but there was nothing to suggest that they were beyond that acting in a disorderly way. There was no threat to the public, absolutely none.
Well, quite the opposite. If we were to take their statements you know, face value and in good faith. But equally, there is a precedent here. I mean, if it was this house today, it could be your house tomorrow. You wouldn't be so sanguine about it then, would you?
Except for it wouldn't be my house tomorrow, would it? This was a political action. So they're not likely to occupy my house on the basis that Roy Douglas, that bloody criminal defence lawyer, we hate him, we hate him. I can't really see it happening. And I doubt whether the police would turn up at the door anyway. They'd probably laugh and think, well, he had it coming for him.
I was a little bit surprised. In fact, so surprised I didn't actually clock it at first when the police officer, the former police officer, which should be clear, Richard, who rang in, it was almost as if he felt it was need to be explained that this goes on and why this would. Of course, we would go round there because it's people like that, regardless of the fact they've unfurled a banner with their aims on it. Yeah. The presumption is they want to burn the place down or that they're complete.
Yeah, and I'm glad you pressed him, and he just simply didn't answer. He couldn't answer. He said, "You don't know them," and then he kept on going on, "But they are that type," and I got labelled as that.
Well, that's
type.
why your story is so pertinent, isn't it?
Can I tell you, I was not a hard lefty. I really wasn't. On the left, in the sort of way that you are, a progressive. That's the right way.
It's all relative, isn't it?
It is. It is. So that was my two pennyworth.
No, and I'm very grateful for it. But it was worth the tension that we built with the intervention from Vadim as well, Pristaiko, the Ukrainian ambassador. Roy, thank you. Craig's in Cheshire. Craig, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I've never called you before, but after that police officer, I needed to call you.
I hope he was a policeman. I've got no reason to doubt him, but if he wasn't, then he's done a grave disservice to the actual Metropolitan Police, hasn't he? Go on, what did you want to say?
I would say he definitely is, because that is the response that they generally have with any squatters. They've always been disproportional to squatters. I've squatted myself before. I don't anymore. I've had cases where they illegally evicted us, and they denied they were ever there. They came in the middle of the night with no warrant, no court papers, kicked the doors open and kicked us out. And then when we put in a complaint against them, they said, "Don't know what you're talking about. We were never there."
Why is squatting so? And it might be an obvious answer to this question, and I guess anyone. I mean, the point is, you only squat empty properties. So
yes, but that's a misconception as well.
Yeah, go on.
Squatters are stealing people's houses. That's never happened to my knowledge, anyway. Generally, the properties we've ever been in have been either very vacant or were commercial properties. So the property they evicted us illegally out of was an old NatWest office. Right. And it had been vacant for like 2 or 3 years. But it was the prominence of it, and I think that's why the response yesterday was there. If you can see the squatters, they don't want you seeing them. Anyway, the high profile, they will come in force like that.
Is it one of those social structures that is a lot more fragile than we realise, do you think? Is it the idea that if you don't come in mob-handed like that and tell them out like a dose of salts, then other people might think, well, hang on a minute, there's a house over there owned by a Russian who's never here. What? And there's... Do you see what I mean?
I think there's an element of that.
Yeah.
But also, I think from my experience with the police that they're there to protect privilege. They're not there to protect.
I wish I could argue with you more passionately about that, because I don't like that being true. But
I've never had a good experience with a police officer, James, in many different ways. Like I got ran down off the pavement about 5 or 6 years ago for no reason. I was cycling down the road in Bristol. My partner at the time bumped into someone's wing mirror. Yeah. It was fine. We checked it. We stopped. We looked around for the owner. He wasn't there. 2 minutes later, that man followed us down in a car, sped in front of us, started screaming and shouting at her, even though she offered to pay for any damage, which there was none of. And she didn't take that very well. It was like, look, if you're going to scream at me, I'm not going to talk to you. I went to cycle off. He decided it was me. You know, he'd said, I've seen it on camera, I've seen this, I've seen that. He then reversed the car and drove straight into me on the footpath. The cops showed up, they accused me of doing something, and then just left.
Is this because of the way you look?
Witnesses. Yeah, definitely.
Well, what do you look like? What did you look like at the time? Because this is...
maybe a little bit shabby, not in particular, to be honest.
No, well, mate, you're talking to the priest when it comes to looking shabby. I mean, I could win prizes for scruffiness, but did you look like a potential protester? Do you know what I mean?
No, I don't look like an anarchist. I didn't look like a punk.
I'm just working out why they come for you and not for... No, I mean, you understand why I'm asking. It's a bit when that fella said people like that... He must have an image in his head as well as behaviour. There must be that people look, you know, like, I don't know, having dreadlocks or something like that. The white people with dread, that whole protest.
Police are bigoted, mate.
Huh?
Police are bigoted in many ways.
Many are, many aren't. And I know that possibly sounds a little hollow, but I do think it's very important. It's a nightmare of a job to do at the best of times. And listen, crikey, no one knows better than I do that you can end up sharing your workplace with some deeply unpleasant individuals, one of whom, of course, Guy Verhofstadt was talking about to Nick Ferrari earlier. In his programme, towards the end of his programme earlier today. So, I mean, the idea that you'd tar all LBC presenters with a Farage-flavoured brush would be absolutely heartbreaking. So any workforce is going to have characters in it that you wouldn't really want to pass the time of day with. So there's lots and lots and lots of good coppers as well. Of course there are. And Craig's misfortune, it would seem, that he hasn't come across any yet. I may stay with this for a tiny little bit longer, because there must be... I would like to hear the alternative view, but not the alternative view that is, oh, scum like that need to be rounded up immediately, otherwise they're going to burn the house down, or words to that effect. How do we feel on the question of that? Shall we speak to Barrington in Kensington? I thought we were short of time. No? OK. Barrington, what would you like to say? I'm told that if I don't speak to you now, I will never be able to speak to you.
That's right, James. No, you won't.
How come? What are you up to? You're about to be carted away? Are you up a lamppost?
Work.
Oh, OK. Quickly, then. Quickly, before you go to work.
Quickly.
Yes.
Right. First off, that so-called police officer which you had on, I believe he was talking a whole load of twaddle, and I'll tell you why, right? 20 to 9 last night, for example. I literally live 5 minutes cycle ride away from actually Belgravia Square, so I rode over there.
Get you.
Yeah, no, but it's not like that, James, believe me.
Go on.
Right? So I rode over there to see what was going on,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah. So I got over there now. Still, they had half of the square closed off.
Right.
Taking in mind, they had already carted off the chaps that were obviously demonstrating or whatever.
Yes.
So they already carted them off. They still have half the square closed off. They still had 3 van loads, and I mean van loads of officers there sitting in their vans. They had another load standing on the corner, entering in and out of the house, etc.
How bizarre.
And there is no way anyone's going to tell me that this is not because it's a class issue. It's a mega class issue.
What about the security issue, though? What about the fact that there's embassies around there? And apart from the embassies, because the class issue, I think I probably sounded quite naive at 10 o'clock this morning, didn't I? So expressing even the vaguest wonder at the idea that if you're super rich, you can expect different treatment from the police than if you're not. But there are security elements to it. You can't...
That may be the case, but at the same time, I have a friend, well, I know of somebody, put it that way, who lives on Belgravia. They had an issue, okay? Now, when they called up, immediately there was a whole load of police there, and etc. Now, where I live in South Kensington, okay, we've had issues here, and I've had to call the police.
Yeah.
Immediately, I've had police here,
Because of your postcode?
And because of the postcode, it's 100%. Now, I know people down in North London who've had issues.
Yeah.
They don't even get a call out until the following day or maybe 2 days later.
I wish this wasn't so plausible, but it just is, isn't it? Barrington, you better get yourself to work, mate. You're going to be late and you can't blame it on me. I'm not going to give you a note or anything like that. Like the manager at River Island in Worcester used to make me get a note off the station master at Foregate Street Station whenever I was late. And on one occasion, I had to wait 40 minutes for the station master to get to work. So I was 40 minutes later for work at River Island than I would have been if the manager didn't make me get a note off the station master. This is the content you come for. It's 11:01.